That's why, although humanists are atheists, not all atheists are humanists. I mean, Joe Stalin was an atheist, but he was no humanist, right? Certainly no political secularist. Yeah. So, I'm well aware that atheists can be totalitarian, viciously, totalitarian too. Humanism is atheism plus kind of political secularism, respect for people's views, be they religious or non-religious, and so on. So.
Revolution of common sense.
Revolution of common sense.
A revolution of common sense.
Truth was once common sense, but today truth is uncommon. Explore biblical truths around faith, business, and politics with Peter Demas. Uncommon Sense in Current Times.
Hey folks, welcome to Uncommon Sense in Current Times. The end of the last show, right at the beginning, right as we were nearing the end with Dr. Stephen Law, who is a humanist and atheist philosopher, we ended up having a conversation. He turned the tables on me. He asked me a question about Christianity and what's happening from a political perspective. And so this second part is he and I have this conversation about Christianity and humanism from a more of a political perspective than any other part of it. So I decided to keep the camera running, and we were going to go forward and see how it works out so that we can have this conversation. Again, if you like this content, please let us know. Please put a message down there and talk about kind of more what you want to see. Send me a message any other way. But anyway, I hope you thoroughly enjoy the second part of this conversation with humanist, philosopher, atheist, Dr. Stephen Law.
I guess one of the things I would like to ask you, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Oh, certainly.
So the last thing I said about humanism is that we're into political secularism. We're right. Keen on separation of church and state. And one of the ways that this issue tends to come up in the UK, and I think in the US a lot at the moment, is some religious people are unhappy about equality legislation that requires them to do certain things. So, for example, if you're a baker, you might have to bake a cake for a gay couple that are getting married. You might be asked to do that, and then if you were to refuse, you might get into some sort of legal trouble as a result of that, because you're discriminating against gay people. Or if you own a B&B or a hotel and people are staying with you, but it turns out a couple are gay, you might say, well, I'm sorry, but this is against my religious beliefs, I'm afraid you have to leave. Again, they're going to get into trouble with equality legislation. This is like one of the top priorities for humanists, is this kind of issue. And I know that many Christians think that, what we're arguing from the Christian perspective is really for something very unjust, that we're stripping religious people of their freedoms and their rights. Possibly we're even persecuting Christians as a result of that. And I was just wondering how you felt about that separation of church and state issue.
Well, it's interesting because separation of church and state is not something that it was a phrase used by the U.S. Supreme Court. It is not something that is in our founding documents. It's not in the Constitution. That phrase itself. There is an establishment clause in the First Amendment, and then there's the allowing there's the allowing of the free exercise of religion, and those are both in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. So as far as that is concerned, I think we have a duty as Christians to be able to say, it is our job to obey God rather than man, and so that's where that comes into play with it. So if we feel that something is being said or being forced upon us that would go completely against our religious beliefs on it. So, for example, I have a restaurant. I have no problem catering to a gay wedding, but I do have a problem if I'm not allowed to speak out about it. If they force me to, it would be a problem for me. But other people I know do have that belief. Jack Phillips in Colorado was the baker that you're referencing that's dealt with a lot of legal issues, because he said, my religious beliefs, I cannot bake a cake for this, and to celebrate something that I think is immoral. So they're putting their morality above human law in that particular situation. So that's where a lot of that plays into it. I think in the UK, for example, Isabel von Spruce is another really good example. I don't know if you're aware of her story in Birmingham.
No.
Yes, she has been arrested twice for silently praying outside of an abortion clinic. She was silently praying. And my what I find interesting is as I said, if she was silently thinking, she probably would not have been arrested. So where's the distinction there of the thoughts that are going into your head, whether or not you had it for religious purposes or not? So to kind of flip that back on you, like, where do you feel about that? Because we may have completely reasonable explanations that aren't religious based on abortion, but if I'm thinking against it or I'm praying against it, is there a distinction, do you think, from the law in that area?
Well, I think that you're absolutely right that sometimes morality trumps the law. And if you feel that something is fundamentally morally wrong, but the law requires that you do it, well, you don't do it and you pay the price. That's clearly the case. So I defend that. And I also believe that, take, for example, a Roman Catholic doctor that's at a hospital that's required or has been asked to perform abortions, which is against his religious beliefs. Should he be compelled to do that? I say no, of course he shouldn't be compelled to do that because he has a strong moral conviction. And we should try and find somebody else to do this. However, I don't think the fact that he's religious adds anything to his conscience. I mean, if an atheist says, no, I don't want to perform abortions, I think that they're morally wrong, I think that should carry just as much weight as the religious view. So my view is that, yes, you can make exemptions to legislation and the rules governing employment and so on, but adding religion to someone's conscience adds nothing so far as, the law is concerned. And so my worry is that if two people think that being gay is morally wrong, having a gay relationship is morally wrong, but they're not religious, they just have that view, and they refuse to bake a cake or let people into their B&B, consistency requires that they be exempt too. Right, because I don't think the religion adds anything. I think it's just conscientious objection. It's a conscientious objection. It doesn't matter whether it's a religious one or no. But at this point, the law is going to become unworkable because everyone that's a bigot is going to say, "Oh yeah, my conscience requires that I don't serve these black people in my." I mean, there are religions even that would. Dutch Reformed Church of South Africa don't believe black and white people should get together. I suppose they own a B&B. Right. They turn people away. Should the fact that they are religious have any effect, carry any weight? I don't think it should. I think they're bigots, and I think the fact that they're religious bigots is irrelevant. Shouldn't add any weight to their objection. So similarly, then what do I think about? So I'm going off in different directions here. So I guess what I feel about. Well, I guess I feel about the sort of the K case and the bed and breakfast kind of case is that I don't think that religiosity adds anything to a conscientious objection, and my feeling is that these people can object, but then they'll need to pay the legal price. They have broken the law. I think it's a just law. I don't think people should be able to. You used to go down the street in the UK years ago, and not that in my lifetime, I think, you would see signs saying no blacks, no gays, no Irish. Utterly unacceptable. Okay, if we're going to let that creep back in, so long as religious people are putting the signs back up, I just don't think that's acceptable. I don't think religious people should have that kind of exemption.
But I would argue that where the moral objection comes from a Christian is rooted in the belief in God and belief of what the Bible says. Now, there are people that twist it for their own purpose, and I think that's where the problem falls. But I would also argue that the same would be true of humanists. The same would be true of all, when they can twist their own. That's why I asked you that question of how do you protect yourself against that, because we can twist it for almost that confirmation bias. I mean, Gandhi used obviously a moral standard in order to engage in his act of civil disobedience, but I also agree with you that even with Gandhi, Martin Luther King here in the United States, and there's plenty of other examples. The one I gave you, Isabel von Spruce, there are consequences that come from that. But part of that duty of civil disobedience from a Christian perspective is we're trying to expose something we think is immoral, and we're trying to point to something that is a moral standard, which is a biblical standard, a biblical worldview. And that's where at least my perspective of it is, and that's where a lot of that comes from. And I do believe in that situation.
I don't personally have any problem with people expressing views about morality in terms of gay people, for example, or mixed race marriages because they have a religious view about that. If people want to express those views in a debate, I don't really have a problem with that. I think they should be challenged.
Yes.
But I don't think that they should have socks stuffed in their mouth and, be locked up simply for saying what it is that they believe. I don't think that's the right approach. If they're actually whipping up hatred, if they're doing that, that's something else. But if they're simply expressing their honest opinion, I think that's fine. And so there are very few cases of actual persecution of religious people in the UK, but it does happen occasionally. There was a guy who expressed doubts about allowing gay marriage, who worked for a sort of a local authority, and he was disciplined and demoted as a result of him saying this, expressing his private opinion in a private setting. It was on a public media page, I think, but it was his own personal private view that he was expressing. Britain's leading gay rights campaigner, Peter Tatchell, came out and defended this guy and said, this is absolutely unacceptable. Of course he should be allowed to say what he believes and what he thinks. We're not in that business of censoring people's honestly held opinions. So there are occasionally these kind of cases, but then at the same time, certainly in the UK, there are cases where... So I was invited to go to the Christian Legal Centre a few years ago, where they engage in a lot of cases like this. They kind of fight them in court, and they presented a long list of these cases. And I thought, I'll just pick one and look at it. And it was a woman was disciplined, fired, I think, for offering a prayer to a family, which sounds horrendous. And one of Britain's leading newspapers, the Daily Mail, went on a great sort of campaign about this and had an opinion piece about it and so on. But when I looked into it, it turned out that this was a teacher who had got into trouble for this once before. What she was dealing with was a young girl who with cancer, whose family had allowed this peripatetic teacher to come in to teach her. But the teacher was telling her that if she just prayed with her disease would be cured or could be cured. And she wouldn't stop doing this. She wouldn't stop repeating this narrative. And eventually the family said, we don't want you to come anymore. It's really upsetting our daughter. And they told the council that had provided the teacher, and the teacher was suspended. Now, in my opinion, that was exactly the right thing to do. The teacher should have been suspended for that. She was causing distress to the family. The media reporting of the event was utterly different to what the facts were. The facts really had been twisted in the way that you were just describing. And so many of these cases, when you actually look closely, they're not what they appear to be. So always take them with it. Some are real, as I mentioned. There was the one involving the guy that got demoted. But more often than not, it's a somewhat flaky story that needs to be investigated more carefully. And there are certainly organisations that work to promote these kind of stories more or less uncritically, and I think that's doing a disservice to religion. Frankly, I think it's not helpful. It's making religion look bad.
Haven't you noticed that low energy, brain fog, or just feeling a step slower might be creeping in after sitting for a while? It could be linked to your circulation. Blood Flow 7 by Juvenon is designed to support healthy nitric oxide levels, which help your blood vessels relax and open up. It improves your oxygen and nutrient delivery to your brain, heart, and muscles. That means better stamina, mental clarity, and overall vitality without caffeine or stimulants. It's made with clinically studied natural ingredients, and in research, these have been shown to boost nitric oxide by as much as 230% in just 3 hours, and it helps open arteries for smoother blood flow. 2 easy capsules a day. No mess, no fuss, and you're supporting heart health, healthy blood pressure, and more energy to power through. So check it out at bloodflow7.com/uncommon or click the link in the description. That's bloodflow7.com uncommon. It is common sense. And we've seen the other side of it too, where they are twisting stories or changing the facts of the stories within the media to also attack Christians, to make Christians look bad, to make us look more bigoted, to make us look worse. I agree with you with each of these, and sadly, and the media has always had problems with bias, but I think now that the media is becoming fewer and fewer owners within the media, I think the bias. I think they don't care as much. It's harder to find the other newspaper that says the opposite of or give different details of it.
No, I agree.
And I think we run into that problem. But where I have issues is this. There is a large attack upon Christians that do believe in supernatural responses to things. And in this situation, if the parents said, "No, I don't want you doing that anymore with our children," to me, for Christianity, there is still the freedom to choose whether this whole idea of free will, and that goes down a whole rabbit hole, as you know, that we can easily go down there, but. If the parents said, "We do not want our child exposed to this anymore," absolutely, I think at that point in time there should be a stop. But that should not have stopped the teacher or that this other person from praying on their own for God to intervene for healing for this child. And I do think there is that line, and I think where Christians a lot of times with the idea of we're trying to help, sometimes can overstep it. I was not a Christian for the first 40 years, and I attacked Christians very vehemently for the first 40 years as well. So that's where so I understand that perspective that you're coming from, but at the same time, I do believe that we still continue to pray for this person in the idea, and we believe that God can do something with it, and I don't always know why He does not, but I do believe that should not stop them, but it should have prevented them from trying to force it, because at that point in time, the Christianity is not real.
Yeah. But I don't think anyone's getting locked up for praying for people, are they?
No, they're not. But in this particular situation, she got terminated. But again, it wasn't necessarily for praying. But there have been people, and especially in the government here, a lot of local governments in particular, that if they did pray for somebody, they could get terminated. They could lose their job because they're saying that you're forcing your religion, that you are trying to establish a religion upon others, and I think that's where a lot of these problems come into play.
Yeah, we have to really look at the. Sorry to interrupt. I don't. I mean, I can see that. I mean, in many cases, that's going to be unacceptable. No one should be disciplined for saying prayers for others. However, I can see that if they're doing that in a particular kind of context and they're really pushing it, that might become a problem, as exactly in the case I've just described. So I'd have to make it's a case-by-case basis, I guess. We'd have to address these on a case-by-case basis, yeah. But I certainly don't want. I mean, as a political secularist, right? I think that the views of the religious and the non-religious should carry equal weight, and they should both be protected. And I should have my right to be critical of religion protected, but the religious should have their rights to promote their views and express their views publicly and engage in acts of worship. All of that should be protected too. That's why. Although humanists are atheists, not all atheists are humanists. I mean, Joe Stalin was an atheist, but he was no humanist, right? Certainly no political secularist. Yeah. So, I'm well aware that atheists can be totalitarian, viciously, totalitarian too. Humanism is atheism plus kind of political secularism, respect for people's views, be they religious or non-religious, and so on. So,
but so many, I can't think of a law right now, and both civil and criminal, that isn't some type of legislation of morality, or an attempt to, even because civil law to me is a form of legislation. I mean, and there's the simple ones of, you're not allowed to kill somebody, you're not allowed to rape somebody. Those are obviously moral issues, but you're not allowed to come onto my property and expose yourself. That there's a morality there of something like that. You can't expose yourself to my children. There's always some type of moral standard behind it, and I can't think of an example of it there. But so once again, if I'm putting that morality into it, and if I have a Christian perspective of where that morality comes from, then at that point in time, I can't separate it, can I?
No, so there are sort of humanists who think that the religious can, make their case for this or that legislation, but they should never ever give a religious argument. They should somehow all be airbrushed out. I don't agree with that at all. I mean, I think that if you have religious views and they inform your your moral perspective, then you should be free to air them. I just don't think that the state should take the fact that it's religious, your objection, shouldn't give it any extra weight.
I see what you're saying.
Shouldn't. Yeah. So by all means express it, but in an increasingly non-religious UK, for example, I mean, less than 50% of people now even identify as Christian. If you want people to adopt a piece of legislation, insisting on giving perhaps exclusively Christian arguments in its support is going to be counterproductive, because people are not going to take those arguments seriously. You'd be better off providing arguments that were politically neutral, that even a non-religious or non-Christian could sign up to. And there are plenty of such arguments in most cases. So I don't think we should be gagging religious people and preventing them from expressing their religious points of view. And they do that. They do that in the House of Commons all the time. It's just that I don't think that the fact that someone has a religious view should give their views a megaphone, which we have in the UK, because we have 26 bishops in the House of Lords. Automatically, 26 Christians sit in there and can block legislation. The only other country in the world where you have clerics appointed to government in that way is Iran. The UK and Iran. We have that. Okay, so this is a campaign issue for.
Yeah, but just because they're bishops, just because of that, I would argue that doesn't necessarily default them to Christian. Just because they have prescribed it, just is the same as you were saying. Just because you're a humanist doesn't mean that you have the same viewpoint of others. There are a lot of people that are in the church that are that are there just in name only. I mean, there's a lot of big pastors of very large churches here that
but they shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, just because they're a bishop doesn't mean they're necessarily going to give a religious argument in a political debate. However, they are bishops, and they are there automatically because they're religious. The state automatically. I mean, I'm sure that in Iran, the clerics that are in government don't always give religious arguments for their political views. That's irrelevant. The point is that there shouldn't be any. You shouldn't automatically privilege religious voices over other voices. It's unacceptable. So this is obviously then a campaign issue for humanists in the UK. We don't think 26 bishops should automatically get seats in the House of Lords where they can act on and potentially block legislation. That's just not acceptable. Any more than, say, choosing 26 atheists,
right?
And having 20, especially reserved for the atheists. These are the atheist seats, and only atheists can sit in those. I mean, that would be outrageous. It's just as outrageous to stick religious people in there in that way. You can have religious people in there, but not because they're religious. They just happen to be religious. That's fine. Yeah.
There is a movement here, and I see it among many people who are atheists here in the U.S. that has said that Christians should not be allowed to be that Christians cannot run for Congress, that Christians cannot serve as a judge. When the Supreme Court Justice Amy Barrett cannot think of her name. All of a sudden, it just escaped me. But anyway, I mean, there was this big debate because she was a Christian that she should not be allowed to serve as a Supreme Court justice. And even when I was not a Christian, I would have had a problem with that.
I've got a problem. I've got a problem with that. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yes, I mean, if you say no, Christians are excluded, religious people are excluded, that's not political secularism. Political secularism says you keep religion out of it. Religious or not religious, it's irrelevant. You just put the best person on the panel, right? You don't exclude people because they're atheists, and you don't exclude people because they're Christians. Both of those things are unacceptable so far as political secularism is concerned. So it strikes me as a very weird position to take, banning people from holding these posts because they're Christian. I'm kind of surprised, but yeah,
yeah, and again, they haven't gone forward with it yet. Like I said, it's just kind of starting. It's kind of more of I would say, an unorganized grassroots kind of push in that area. You see it in a lot of pieces, social media, that kind of stuff. So
if it was, this woman should not be given that position, not because she's a Christian, but she's a Christian with extremely unpleasant views, extremely extreme view, well, then I might listen in just the same way as I might listen if she happened to hold really unpleasant and extreme views that happen not to be Christian.
Right.
You know, if she was an atheist, that I'll take seriously. But the mere fact that someone's a Christian, obviously that shouldn't disbar you from public office. That's ludicrous. Yeah.
I agree. Well,
yeah.
We are definitely out of time. Dr. Law, I can't appreciate it. You know, one of the things that I said about you from the beginning is that you have a very I forgot the word I used, but you're very open. You're very charismatic in your debate style. Again, I encourage everybody watching to watch your debates. Even if I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that you say in your debates, I love the way you debate. You're very thoughtful in your debates, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate you having you on the show. Is there any place that people can go to find out more about you, to find out more about humanism, to understand it? Obviously,
well, if you want a very short introduction to humanism, you know, I did write that one. So you could try that book, and then I've written philosophy books. The philosophy gym is a particularly good introduction if you're interested in the kind of philosophical questions about morality and God and all sorts of other stuff. Could a machine think? Free will? If you're interested in those kind of questions and you want a kind of quick, fun introduction to those kind of questions, then you could try my book, The Philosophy Gym: 25 Short Adventures in Thinking. It's not just a sort of long atheist diatribe. I do try and remain reasonably balanced throughout. Yeah.
Well, again, I appreciate it. I appreciate you trying to be balanced, and I appreciate you coming on the show. And I hope we can have conversations again, because I think there's some great topics out there that I think we can discuss and show people out there that just because we might disagree on different things philosophically, we don't have to yell and scream at each other. So I think
absolutely not. No, this has been a pleasure, Peter. I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate your very calm, measured, and thoughtful approach. It's been great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.